Welcome to Ask the Mayor. I'm Kurt Morris, the mayor of San Dimas. To my right is Blaine Michaelis, the city manager of San Dimas. The purpose of this program is to give you an opportunity to call and talk to us about things involving the city of San Dimas that you're interested in. It can be questions, comments, even if the comments are negative. If you have any problems, if anything that you would like to talk to us about, this hour is to give you that opportunity. Now, while people are waiting and to dial their phone or do anything, we will cover some items that we think will be of interest to you. However, that doesn't mean the primary purpose is not to talk to you. So whatever subject you want to discuss, we will discuss. But in the meantime, Blaine has a few things that, but I do just want to make a comment that for those of you who happen to see the city council meeting on Tuesday night, there was a very large crowd, which our staff handled really well. They set up, obviously the people could not all get into the council chambers, so they set up television sets with chairs facing the television sets in several places. John Lee, at the end of the meeting, I commented about John Lee because he was the go-to guy that set all the electronics and everything up. But we also, the staff had done a lot of planning along with the Sheriff's Department with Captain Andy Berg and Lieutenant, many members of the staff of the Sheriff's Department who were going to be present for the meeting. And I just felt that it was very orderly, very well handled, because it was that the subject matter people were discussing is one that can raise very high emotions, and there were some, but for the most part, I think it went very well. I was impressed that most of the people really did what they should do. There was a little cheering and a few things like that. That was okay, but there were very few real disruptions, and I appreciate all the people who were there. I appreciate the people the staff people who were working there. Teresa stood there for hours. We at least were sitting down. Teresa Bruns stood there with people signing in just before they went up to speak. And it really, I think, in many cities, those meetings have turned into kind of brawls. This one did not, and I attribute it to the really good planning and the way that our staff handled everything and treated everyone, and the sheriff's deputies who were assigned just did an exemplary job. So Blaine, other than the loss of sleep, have you recovered from all of that?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, now we had a retreat a little earlier, and retreat means we come into this room with the city council and the staff, and we go through a kind of a planning sort of agenda of the things that the city, the issues facing the city, and how we should go on those. So Blaine has suggested that for tonight, maybe just going through that agenda and reporting to the public on some of the things that we talked about, and in some cases we gave directions, in some cases we just was kind of a consensus on what we were going to do. So Blaine, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm glad you made it tonight.
Me too. There are a couple of things we presented as updates, projects we've been working on for some time, and it was helpful to just kind of tell the council where we are with some things. One is the software that we use for our building permits is almost 30 years old, and so it had been renewed, of course, in its license agreement and so forth, but it got to the time where it was no longer supported, and we needed to look to a new software program to be able to manage our building permit process. And so we shopped around and came up with a company called Acela. Acela has not only building permit in software, but also they do other software, for services to city, like building inspection, code enforcement requirements, planning, functions, applications for development, development review. And so it does these other things which allows the system to pull it all together and to be able to provide a good management system for the processes that we need to take care of in those areas. And so it's called Acela, and we've been working on it for some time. Boy, software installations it's kind of like driving a car down the road and maintaining it at the same time, because your daily work has to be done as you start to repair and fix and install a new engine. It's kind of exciting driving down the road installing a new engine as you go.
Particularly if you have to take off one of the wheels.
Oh yeah, and so
and some of that was that.
And so we gave the update to the council as we're just about to the point where all of the internal systems are operating as we wanted them to be. There's still some minor adjustments, but it is primarily minor. The other thing with new software today, it allows outside access to the information. For example, if you want to be able to see how your application process is doing with the city to, a permit to build a home or a commercial structure, you'll be able to go in and check and see where it is in the process. See how your architect is doing on the plan checks to turn those around, and how the city is doing in processing your application. And so those things are part of all this, but we sure wanted to make sure that the internal parts of the software was working well. So we're at that point where we feel we're comfortable with the internal operations. We'll continue to make sure that all the bugs are worked out and it's working well, and then we can expand it to do these other things. So we're pleased to give that report to the council, and pleased at some point in the near future where we can announce these incremental opportunities for people to have access to the system itself, and so that they can be able to know how their projects are going. But in the meantime, our inspectors, when they go out in the field, they don't have a chalk, a kind of a clipboard with a paper and pencil process to do your building inspection. They have iPads. They're wirelessly connected so that, and they're in the field, they can have their appointment schedule in front of them. If it's changed, it updates. Once they complete their inspection in the field, they check the boxes and write their notes. They can take a picture of the matter, and then as soon as they close that file, it's immediately and automatically downloaded to City Hall. And at the end of the day, when they'd have to tally up their 15 inspections and put them into the system, that's not needed, so they can do more inspection time. So in the meantime, that's the level of service that we're able to have. In addition, receiving and responding to emails in the field is also possible. And so not only is that with building inspection, but with code enforcement. If we get a call of something, we go out to investigate, we can call up the property on the iPad. We can look at the history of the actions that have been taking place on that property. We can take a picture of the situation, and ultimately it'll prepare the paperwork that we would need to do to follow through. So happy to get to this point. We need to kind of keep going with it to have it fully operational, but we're pleased and hopeful it'll have those kind of services.
It's almost as big a change going from what we had, even though it had been updated, as you say, to what we now have, as it was to go from pen and ink to the first system we started with.
I think you're right, because you can just do so much more today. The other thing we gave an update on is our website. The cities, that's cityofsandimas.com. So we've been working on refreshing the visual appearance and the navigation of our website system. We've had it the same layout and format for some time. And so we gave the City Council a preview. We've created a beta test of the new website and to make it more graphic, which is certainly where things are going today. In other words, in seeing lots of text or going through lots of text to get to things, that you click on symbols or icons, or better yet, pictures. And when you open it up, it's more interesting to read because it's more visual. And there's a background and the colors and all those things just to refresh it, because graphics has also improved, since we put the graphics together for the current, city website. So now we've got the structure to it, but it's just cleaning up. I mean, if you've managed a website over time, to me, it's kind of like a garage. You're doing something in the house and you say, well, it won't fit here. Let's just put it in the garage for now. And
For now.
For now. And then pretty soon you go and you look in the garage and you say, my goodness, there's all this stuff. And that's what we're experiencing with our website. For example, if we wanted to monitor, like even 2 years ago, it was the downtown project. So we created a whole website for that. And we need to go and glean that off the system and kind of edit and clean. And then sometimes our information is outdated. And so updating that and keeping it all available, because most people expect that they can get things from a website nowadays. They want it instantaneous and they want to do everything possible from a website. And so we're working through all those things, cleaning out the garage, making sure that the content is good.
And one of the things I think that makes it more difficult, or there's not such an urgency to clean things out, is there's so much storage capacity.
Right.
So before, I remember long ago, with my own computer, every now and then you have to go through and delete a lot of files.
Right.
So you had to have a cleanup operation. Now, it used to, your computer would start to run slowly and
Right.
all those things. Now
Right.
you hardly know it, particularly when a lot of those things are in the cloud. I have one charge. It's 99 cents a month from Microsoft for storing something in the cloud. But it's whatever it is. And they give you a little bit of free, and then they go up all the way to 99 cents a month. So I don't know how, when you get to another level, but it's pretty interesting.
It is, and you're right. It's just the ability to save information, and you're probably getting a gigabyte, at least, or maybe 5 for that 99 cents a month. And that was a word we didn't know.
Yeah, I think this is actually something like they give you maybe 5 free, and then they give you like for 5 to 15 or something is 99 cents a month.
Wow.
And 15 is
Right.
a lot compared. I once upon a time, the first PC I had, it didn't have a hard drive. It had floppies. But there was a company that sold a hard drive on a card. It was called the hard card or something. And you could buy that, and it was 10 megabytes.
Wow.
And it fit on a card that went in a slot, and it actually had a little drum on it, a little drive. Well, man, that seemed like all the storage in the world.
That's right.
And now you can have a picture that's 5 or 6 megabytes.
Right.
So it's,
Yeah.
but so we're not yet opening the Acela, as I recall, up to the public to be able to get in to look at things until we've run a few more tests.
Right.
But internally, it's fully
Yes.
working, right?
Yeah. I would, if I gave a percentage, we're probably 95% of it doing what we need it to do for our daily function. So, and it's just some very minor things. For example, a couple of things on business licenses that we need to just have the programmer help us with and to make sure that it runs well. But 95% is pretty good, because of
definitely.
its abilities.
And one of the things that, as I understand from your report on this, there's a lot of management information.
Right.
So that the department heads and you and other people, administration or otherwise, have a chance to really have a handle on what people are doing and getting accomplished. And
Right.
So.
Yeah, I think it can notify us when something is on its third plan check. And for the audience, when you prepare plans to build something, you submit those to the city. We check them according to the building code or whatever construction requirements. And so if we check to make sure that they're compliant, if they're not, then we mark them and send it back. That is one plan check. So if something goes to 3 plan checks, then maybe that's a red flag that something's not quite right, or maybe we should sit down with the applicant or the design engineer and go over some things. So the system could automatically tell us, there are 7 third plan check projects in the system, and here's the contact information. so that we could.
You could find out
Sure.
which ones are.
And conversely, if you were the owner and that was your project going through, you could log in, and if your architect says, "Oh, I turned that in for the city to review last week," so you can go online and say, "No, the city hasn't yet to receive it." So those things to be able to help manage a project, give us good information, and provide better service. So we're coming along.
Well, we've been working on this new installation for a couple of years.
We have.
But it's a massive, when you think about it, other than the financials that we do in a different computer system, it's everything we do.
Right. Yeah, if I put a statistic to it, we issue about 12 to 1,300 building permits a year. We will process maybe 600 to 800 code enforcement cases. So all of and then the inspections that are necessary and all that. So it's a big number, and it involves all the employees using that system so that everyone can look at it and have the updated thing. So like all data, there's input requirements too. We're just hoping that we can set it up so a lot of that, like in the field with the iPads, it's easy to input that information so that we're spending less time with data entry.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into the design of the input sort of document, so that in this case there's no paper, but the screen comes up with what you need.
Yes.
And many times, not a lot of writing required.
But most plans nowadays are starting to come in electronically, which is terrific, because then those files just simply go into the software system, and that's what's get routed instead of a hard copy of some 2 foot by 3 foot, plan. So it all helps.
If you've ever been in the back part, the people watching, back part of the city hall, back with planning, and you find we store an awful lot of big rolls of plans that were submitted that way, and they're part of the record that we hang on to for a long time.
We do.
Because it's amazing how long buildings last.
So we're processing major developments, like there's a development in the foothills that has a whole bunch of grading, all of the gold line, stuff that's coming in, and it's 80 pages just to deal with one intersection. So there's a lot of processing.
Yes.
The other thing we talked about, and I would be curious if the callers would want to let us know their feelings about this. National Night Out is a nationwide evening set aside to encourage neighborhoods to get together and get to know each other, and and then public safety plays a role to be there and to come to the neighborhoods and become acquainted. If there's just to kind of acquaint public safety and neighbors to each other. So it's always the first Tuesday in August, and so we participate in that. And so we've been using a similar approach of how we would do that, and it's very close to our city birthday barbecue, which is always on the first Saturday in August. And so there's 2 major community events kind of side by side. But the idea is what we've done in the past, or in the most recent past, is that a neighborhood could say that they would like to sponsor a stop of a caravan of public safety personnel that will kind of wend their way through the community, stop at this particular location, become acquainted, and then that neighborhood kind of prepares refreshments or a barbecue meal or something.
Some of them are more than refreshments.
They're pretty incredible. And so then they would stay long enough to make sure they had time to get to the next place on the route. And so we've been using that system for some time. And more recently, Gary Enderle has put together an event at Via Verde Park, kind of like a regional event, and had resources come to the park, and then invited folks to come there to be able to have their National Night Out event under those conditions. And then others have kind of come and gone with hosting the events. Last year also, McKinley Children's Center wanted to do a larger neighborhood event. So we put it on the agenda so that there could be just kind of a discussion about are there some things we could do to be more effective? Is there a way we can reach more people? Or is there a format to the program that people would enjoy more than the caravan or the regional activity so we put on the agenda just for a general discussion about those things, and just made that there's a variety of what cities do. I mean, they do all of the things we just talked about, and some of them just do a very nice job with sponsoring neighborhoods and making it very easy for them to have a neighborhood, and then they'll send, instead of a caravan, they may assign a couple of public safety personnel to go to that neighborhood for a while, for a little longer than what the caravan could stay. So we kind of, but I guess the point is, there's a lot of opportunities, a lot of alternatives. And I guess what I thought we came up with is, well, let's kind of keep our options open. It could be that there's certainly a lot of ways to do this, and why not be open to all those that people would want to do? And so there was a subcommittee of the City Council formed to meet with staff in the Sheriff's Department to kind of fine tune and to talk about what would be good. But if you've been a participant of National Night Out, or you have some ideas about what you feel would be appropriate or effective for you or your neighborhood or your area of the community, we'd like to hear.
Definitely, we'd like to hear, because it's a great idea, and people have been doing. We've done it a lot of ways, and then it's like everything. You have to keep refreshing the concepts, and we've been looking at. Our staff has been looking at in Chino Hills, where they try to have a large number of much smaller neighborhood events. We have in San Dimas, we've had a couple of places where the neighborhood events are pretty big. A lot of people come, and that's a good thing too. But it just fits a neighborhood where you don't have to do it that big. One of our concepts, as Blaine said, would be to take a look, and everybody that would like to do one and just get their neighbors together, we can make sure that some representatives of police, fire, other public safety would come there. Instead of having just one caravan, we'd split it up, or one of the concepts would be we'd split that up and be able to make it to several and stay a little longer, so you could actually talk to people and get a little bit acquainted. The basic concept of National Night Out, when they started, was to get neighbors in the same neighborhood to get out together on an evening and sort of get acquainted and talk about themselves. And because one of the problems that not a problem, it's a change in the way things are. We don't have front porches anymore, where people would be out on the front porch and somebody walking by and you'd stop and talk a while. So if you have any ideas that you could call us tonight, or you could send an email to Blaine, or you could call Blaine's number after hours and just give him your thoughts. And if you leave your name and a contact information, someone will get in touch with you to see how we can work it all out, or how we can incorporate your ideas with others.
So please do, folks. We'd like your feedback. We'll convene the subcommittee, and we'll kind of work through the things we can think best, but it really does help when we hear from what people would like to do. The other thing we talked about was our city housing program. The way our housing program started were two different ways. One was because the city used to be a redevelopment agency, a portion of that money was set aside for housing projects, affordable projects, being able to deal with the supply of affordable housing or maintaining affordable housing. So that's one reason why we had a housing division or a housing function, is because we had regular amounts of money coming to be able to help produce housing under those objectives. And then the other reason why we had a housing program is actually the city bought some property. We actually own a mobile home community in San Dimas, Charter Oak, and so the other role that the Housing Authority has performed has been able to be the owner of that facility. And so, which really runs itself well. It kind of runs independent, and all of its expenditures and revenue kind of come to and from community itself. But with redevelopment going away, we've had a need to figure out what's the best way for us to use remaining funds. And so this is a long way to say we basically, folks, have about $200,000 a year, maybe go up to $300,000 a year as far as money that we can use. We were hoping that we would have a lot of flexibility with the expenditure of those funds. We've been using some community development block grant monies for housing rehab as a grant. For example, to replace a roof or substandard plumbing, or to be able to help with some real physical problems of housing stock. It was income-based. In other words, it was available according to your income, and so that they'll be able to be of help to you in fixing up your home. But the new that will probably stay the same. It's just the money will be less available for community development block grants. But we were hoping that we'd be able to have more flexibility with the money that we'll be receiving, this $200,000 to $300,000 a year. But unfortunately, the priorities are really dealing with increasing the amount of affordable housing, which is fine, but there's not a lot you can do to be able to make a big dent in that process. The other priority is to go toward homeless services, services for the homeless, rapid housing, or anything associated with helping to address homeless issues in our community. And then we can join with other jurisdictions in our area and pool the money together to work on these kind of housing-related projects. That does require cooperation, but on the other hand, it is an option to us. But frankly, if we don't spend the money on any of these priority matters, we lose the money. In essence, it's forfeited to the state, and then they'll be able to reallocate it or use it in whatever way. So we want to make sure we can use it as best we can for local resources. So we just had a discussion about, now that we're to the point where we can start to make some plans for how much money is available, we started to look into the requirements of spending those monies. And it's a little bit more restrictive than we were hoping, but at least we'll have some resources to address those kind of things.
What we were able to do in the past, we never in San Dimas never actually built projects as such. But if a development was being done in an area that was in a redevelopment agency, where the tax increment was coming to the redevelopment agency, we had, 20% of that had to be spent for low to moderate income housing. The way we generally did that was, like Avalon Apartments is a very good example. We actually used some of the money, and we paid it to the project to buy down the level of the rent to the affordable or actually maybe mostly affordable.
Yes.
And there's a standard for what affordable housing is. And so you drive through there or look around, it's not like there's something built for low income, because it's the same housing that's the standard in the complex, except that people who qualify can rent at a lower rate than the market rate, and that's fixed for 55 years. Yes. The price is not fixed, but the price can increase over time, but it always has to be within that affordable index. That worked very well for San Dimas. We created quite a bit of housing. We also created some senior housing over the hardware store in really a pretty innovative and creative way to use redevelopment set-aside money. So it worked very well. The government, somehow, the governor, they didn't quite figure out that was the major source of building of low to moderate income housing in California. And so they said, well, throw out redevelopment, not apparently realizing they were also throwing that out. Yeah. But and it's too bad that because people who are Sacramento and otherwise, they're setting regulations for the entire state. Those regulations maybe work in some places better than in other places, but there's very little local initiative that you're able to do, and that's too bad, but it is the way it is, and we're working with it, and I think we will come up with some good ideas for ways to make things work.
Yeah. But it's finally gotten to the point where we can be able to start to plan for this because we can have assurance as far as the money that we'll be able to have as a resource for this. So we wanted to give the City Council a report on that, and we'll use these new requirements to come up with a good program. So the other thing that we talked about is the utility undergrounding, as far as, and the way this comes into play is if there's a new development that's coming in and there's existing power lines either across the property or through the property, and in other words, it's not part of a major subdivision, but it's just happens to be overhead lines, whether it's communication lines or power lines. And so the theory is if you come and build on that property, then the city has had a policy that you would underground the utilities associated with your project, up to a point. There are some times if you're underneath a 64 kV line or 12 kV line, it's just too expensive to underground that power. And it's just not cost effective, and it's onerous. And so, but on the other hand, if it's less than that, then we've had this policy because to be able that the development would pay for putting that utility underground, especially the communication and the power. So that kind of triggered that requirement. Or if you owned property and you wanted to subdivide it, in other words, make one lot into two or one lot into three, that triggered a new change. And so then any of the future development on that site, the vacant properties, would be subject to having to underground the utilities. And it is an expensive situation. And so there are a couple of times when we've got to implement these, and it's been a challenge for people financially to do them. And so the council said, well, let's think about it. Let's talk about it a little bit and see, because in some cases, if it's impractical or too expensive, but it still is a good idea to have utilities put underground, some cities charge an in lieu fee. In other words, instead of having to require you do it, they require a reasonable payment, which then goes to the city, so that in other parts of the city where undergrounding would be cost effective or would be more, have a more major public benefit, then somewhere in the city we're putting power lines underground, which is kind of like the first priority. So we had that discussion, and I think the consensus was to ask for, there's a little bit of hesitation to just kind of jumping in with both feet and doing the in lieu program, but maybe there might be a willingness to take a look at some ideas or some concepts, but that was discussed by the council.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the number is very big, and that's one of the reasons that the in lieu, you think person's building one house and it's going to cost this much money. So I think we really do need to come out with a good in lieu program that would affect money coming into a fund where it could be used appropriately to underground utilities because it looks good. We should be as lucky as the village of Woodstock, Vermont. Mr. David Rockefeller married a lady from Woodstock, Vermont, and they got married in 1934 in the Congregational Church, and just as a wedding gift to the village, David Rockefeller undergrounded all of the utilities, paid for undergrounding utilities.
That would be a better program than an in lieu program, wouldn't it?
That was a good program.
Wow.
So if there are any Rockefellers around or people with like expense, I mean, that was a very nice wedding present to the community.
Wow. Okay, we'll have to put that in our alternatives.
Yeah,
then.
but that's we just got to look for that person.
Wow. Okay. The other thing we talked about, and I think this is, and again, I hope this is interesting to the viewers. We talked about street lighting. Street lighting is undergoing a change. instead of the high pressure sodium, which are those yellow lights, and we all know what they're like, it's been the traditional, or at least the last 20 years or so, means to how you would light streets with street lights. LED technology has arrived when it comes to street lighting. And as we all know, LED lighting provides a different kind of light. It's a little brighter, and it certainly uses a lot less energy. When you're running street lights that are on 8 to 9 hours, in the wintertime even longer, you know, it's very expensive to be able to light those streets. And so, but the technology wasn't quite there cost-wise, except for just recently within the last 18 months to 2 years. So the cost to retrofit the streetlights has dropped tremendously, and given us the option of having LED streetlights, both in the overhead cobra lights as well as the nostalgic, we call them nostalgic, but the old-fashioned lights that are along the streets in downtown San Dimas. Those kind of glow like a ball. And so, but on the other end now, the technology for LED lighting can direct the light down and make it brighter so that it functions more as a street light instead of a pole with a light bulb on it. So we want council to know that we're exploring these things, and that many of the cities around us, you can contact Edison, and because there's so much savings in energy, Edison is willing to come and do the installation at no upfront cost. And then immediately also you get a lower rate and it costs you less. You know, for the next 20 years, it could save you $100,000. And then at the end of that time, the savings is even greater because the retrofit has already taken place, the cost to recover that. And so, but there's some decisions to make. It is a brighter light, and it does come in some slightly different shades, like maybe a blue, but you can have it be a daylight color. And so what it means is, especially on residential streets, will it be too bright? Or is there a color scheme of LED lighting that would be more effective? And the other thing is, because of the way that the bulbs are structured, they can either be 3K lights or 4. Now, it's a fancy way of saying they can produce more light with a lot less energy than the old high-pressure sodium, but they can almost make a street look like it's daytime at night if you go from 3 to 4. So to give people an example of the most recent LED installations, if you go to the intersection of San Dimas Canyon Road and Foothill, we recently put in new traffic lights in that intersection and put in mast lighting or cobra lighting with LEDs in that intersection. And from my perspective, I go there all the time. Of course,
yes,
you too.
I do too.
And at night, it is far more, you can see clearer, and there's no shadows. Everything is there. You know, the colors, everything is just brighter. And so the safety element would kind of, and especially on a busy road like Foothill, Route 66, some cities are putting 4,000 kV lighting on those major arterials, and especially the intersections, and considering 3,000 kV for the residential streets. So it's a little softer, but still, you're going to have a street light. It's going to provide security, safety. And if you're an evening or a morning walker, you're going to be a lot safer because you'll be able to be seen. The other thing is they can adjust the lighting pattern so that more of the street is lit from the energy that the street light is consuming. So we wanted to bring the council up to date on that, because there is an interest on the council to talk about the level of lighting and the color of the lighting.
The color also, yes.
And so we will do that. But on the other hand, the council said, we still recognize the benefit of this, so if you can go ahead and get in line to have the conversion take place. The waiting list makes you feel like Disneyland. It's 18 months before they'll come around to you. And but on the other end, we're going to register that we're interested, and then over the next while, we'll be able to make the decision about brightness and color. The benefit to us is Covina just is finishing up their project. So we can schedule an evening field trip and go over and take a look at the difference between 3 and 4. I guess Cerritos is doing an experiment. They're having Edison come and do one block in 3,000 and the other block in 4,000. So we may do some of those things as well. But
on the day of the ciclovia, the San Dimas Public Works Department was giving away through some organization LED lights, absolutely free. And so there are all these choices, and people were kind of dumbfounded by, well, what's 4,000 and what's 3? And there were some little bulbs they were giving away that were 2,700.
yeah,
But it's all in all of this is really a definition of the sort of the warmth or coldness of the light.
right.
And I don't know if I could tell that much difference between a 3 and a 4, but maybe some people can. And
Yeah,
some
well,
people like the 3 better because it's a little warmer. But the amazing part is they are also able to, because almost all these things now, these LEDs have a light that's directed, and so you get it with a 9-degree angle or a 14-degree angle, or depending on how much area you want to cover, how many lumens you want to get to the ground, and they've just made it amazing. The whole concept of LED lighting has just revolutionized something that we've had for 100 years or more in street lights.
You know, personally, I like street lights to be light to street, you know, for safety, or if you're walking. And a lot of people walk at dusk, or they take advantage of the early morning hours. And then if you think that, vehicle safety, being able to see everything clearly as you drive on San Dimas streets at night, I think, and the security of it too. Frankly, being able to have lighting that takes out all the shadows. It goes from street light to street light. That's why I'm anxious to make a good decision with this. And it's the curse of technology. You can look at this smorgasbord of choices, and then you think, well, no, just give me one.
Get paralyzed by Well, it is, it's pretty amazing, but one of the things San Dimas has a real program for sidewalks. We do not, I don't think we have any, by this time, we have any sidewalk deviations unless they get uprooted or changed. It's where we're outside the technical limits even of the ADA for be able to make the passage. But even with that, there are some places where you need good light on the sidewalks, because people who are older, their vision's maybe not quite as good.
Right.
And in addition to that, a fall and a broken hip is an absolutely devastating thing. That's one of the reasons we made the commitment. We joined with the insurance pool that we're a part of, with a program of really looking at everything and having a constant inspection of sidewalks and taking action to fix them so that we could try to eliminate the hazards. And I don't think we've had any falls on our sidewalks for quite a while.
Right, and it's the assistance of our insurance agency that helps us with that, and the commitment, and frankly, the commitment of funding by the city council through the budget to make sure that, when something does come up, that we can get right on it and get it leveled off or repaired, so that, because people do enjoy their sidewalk, and safety is just really important under those conditions.
And the fact that people feel safe in walking in the evening and night on the sidewalks, they're used a lot. So lighting them is an important thing, and I think this new program will be, we'll still have the decorative lights in the downtown, in the areas in the old downtown, but the street lighting is important, and we're going to go to, in the long run, it's going to be a lot better and cheaper.
Yeah.
So that's not bad.
The other thing we talked about, I thought was interesting. It just shows folks that we really do try and listen. Sometimes the city has established zoning requirements or land use, I wouldn't call them restrictions, but goals for certain areas of the community. And so they were established decades ago. Let me give you the example that we'll talk about is Foothill Boulevard has a scenic easement requirement that's laid over all the development that takes place on Foothill Boulevard through San Dimas. And the basic requirement is for the first 20 feet on either side of the road, you cannot build structures or buildings or parking lots. So that when you drive down Foothill, you have a sense of an openness and landscaping opportunities and buildings not crowding the street. And so that the goal was to create that kind of an ambiance. And if you've driven down that part of San Dimas, you notice that that ambiance has been maintained. And so the buildings are set back, the landscaping is there, and so it's more visually appealing. And so and so it's been that way for some time. So now, before it was implemented, there's some buildings that were previously constructed. And so, and that was fine. You can build a building before the requirement gets established, and then it just means that you can still use the building just like you normally would, and it's your use and so forth, unless you're making a major change to your building. You're adding to the building or changing its use or adding more services on the property. And so when that happens, then the theory is you need to comply with the current requirements. Well, in this case, complying with the current requirements is a major impact on the business. And so the question might be, appropriately, well, now that it's in violation of that requirement, and normally we would force them to comply, but it's a major impact, what do we think about that? And so we use this as a case study to kind of put on the table to the City Council and say, what do you think we ought to do under conditions like this? Should we give it some thought?
And there are really, I think, only 3.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them has been there since the 1920s,
right,
or earlier.
Right.
In fact, that one, it's on a kind of the crest of a hill, and on Foothill Boulevard, it's where there's a restaurant there, but now, and there was restaurants there before, but a guy that owned that property a long time ago that I used to work for when I was a kid, he said that there was a roadhouse up there, and this roadhouse, the Prohibition days, and it was a great place for that kind of business because you could see both ways on Foothill for like a mile. And so the law enforcement officers could not slip up on you. By the time they got there, you'd be suspicious of who they might be, and so you'd be able to kind of hide whatever was illegal, or at least not make it so obvious. So, I mean, some of these things have been there a while.
Yeah, they have.
And they're you run into almost to the conflict of historic versus, and can you make a historic use? Can they even change the historic kind of deal? But that's a challenge. And we had, I think in our discussion of it, we certainly discussed all of the philosophies about which way to go and how to go, and I think I don't know that we've come to a conclusion yet.
But we're leaning toward the idea of, we ought to be open to the idea that a long-standing standard or requirement ought to be carefully implemented with some judgment. And
yes.
So the staff thought that, well, you wouldn't want to give staff that judgment, so let's have the council kind of weigh in on it. And but I think it's always a good idea to give thought to, are we accomplishing things we need? If not, then maybe we need to adjust, or have we accomplished something and now is it an impediment? Or are there unintended consequences at this point? Or are there overriding factors? And I think it's good to be open to that dialogue.
One of the things I think that we have learned in city government is that you can make a great plan, and you can do that, and you can do everything you can think of to make it really work. Then over time, circumstances change, and part of it doesn't work anymore.
Right.
And it's how do you deal with that? That a lot of people say, well, I complied with it. Why doesn't everybody else?
Yeah. Yeah. And so it'll be fun to continue this discussion because I think it's a discussion worth having.
And that brings up another point. When we have twice a year, we have a council and city staff retreat. We do it right in this room. And although we do not televise that because of facility and other kinds of things, it's more like a round table sort of discussion. Those are open to the public. They're all open to the public, and the public has an opportunity to participate in the discussion. It's not like we typically have always done this. We do have the ordinary set-aside time for oral communications, but as we're going through discussing each of these things, all of the people in the room are invited to give their opinions too. So if you are interested in things like that and you would like to participate, when you see that there's and you can see it on our website, we announce it in a lot of ways, that we're having one of those retreats, and the next one will be in the fall now. But if you're interested in coming and seeing what the discussion is and participating in the discussion, you're more than welcome. They are open meetings, just like the city council is. It's just a little less formal. So
Yes.
it's kind of fun. People do come and have positive contributions.
The other thing we really talked about a lot at our last show, and it was how the city approaches economic development, information to help us strategize things. So I don't want to kind of rehash what we talked about before, but we wanted to spend some time to talk to the council about, coming up with a meaningful program to always have a watchful eye on the city's economic base, making sure that we're providing services and that we've had a good mix of retail and commercial and strategies to kind of help the city just be stronger financially all the time. So we reviewed that too. The other thing we talked about was an effort to be able to reach out and be open to the public when it comes to those who feel they're frustrated or stuck with our development review process. In other words, it's just not going very well, or there's things that the city could do better. And so it's something we've always pay attention to, but we wanted to give a structure where that we might actually make contact with folks who have been through the process with us and have a chance to sit down with them and to say, well, what went well, or what did not go well? What could the city do better? So we'd have a focus group or an interview or just a face-to-face or a group session, even if it's with an outside facilitator, to try and just monitor how well are we doing with our development review. And so to do that, and as well as taking the time to really help people with helpful hints, with ideas of what they can do for greater success in getting their project in a timely manner. Because our staff does this every day. And we certainly know what frustrates a smooth application process. And so we're preparing our best thinking to be able to give that to folks so that they can hopefully avoid some of these pitfalls or things that just drag it out.
I was thinking we really want to kind of be on the other side of just say no. Yeah. Instead of just saying no, we want to have the staff always be looking for ways that they can say, you can't do it this way, but maybe you could do it this way, or with alternatives, and having the people, hopefully getting the mentality with our staff that we really want to help people. And we're not trying to just say it's this way or no way. If there's any way to meet the codes and make that work, then you make it work. One of the problems that we frequently have, and Blaine is very good at becoming involved, if a citizen calls a city council member with a complaint, and these happen sometimes in development kind of things, or in public works, or not so much public works, but in the building department. Well, one of the things that people, you have a contractor, and the contractor is working for you, and in a way, the city is really working for you too. But the city's responsibility is to not let the contractor or anyone else take shortcuts that violate the building code that would create problems for you later. And we've had some really good examples, and Blaine has been involved with talking with everybody and getting all the information. And a lot of times, where our staff is being totally unreasonable is in fact trying to get people to conform to what the law is and for the protection of safety. We had one involving a sign and how it could be installed, and the installation was a proposed installation, and the building department said you can't do that, that won't be safe, and the people were all upset. Well, right in the instructions that came with the sign for installing it, the manufacturer's suggestions said, do not do what the contractor was going to do. And they said, in particular, do not do that if you're going to have it up above anything so they can fall on anybody's head. Well, that's right in the instructions. It's not just that we have a silly rule, as the contractor said. It was that the people who built the sign and who knew what it takes to support it said, don't do it. The contractor never read those instructions. So you may hear stories, and when we do hear stories, Blaine is looking. He's been working for a long time on making the staff understand we need to help people, but a lot of times the help people want is to be able to take shortcuts that are dangerous. And so I think that everybody needs to know that we need to be public service oriented and all of this, but we are also the parties responsible for safety. And you can look at it that the building inspectors and the building department are there to protect you when you're having a building done. And so if your contractor is arguing too much about what they're saying, you might want to look and find out yourself why these things are happening.
We got about a minute and a half left. So
okay.
One thing we did at the retreat, and it's timely, we gave an update on Marchant Park and all of the renovations that are taking place. Folks, it's coming along great. If you see it from the street, you think it's almost done. Well, it is. It's getting closer all the time. And so, but it's more than just the building. We're resurfacing the tennis courts in matching colors that are not the traditional. The other colors match to the new playground equipment, 2 sets of playground equipment, the new restroom, and the all new sidewalks and parking lot resurfacing. It's just a major project, and we're going to have a great time with a celebration to open it pretty soon, probably in the early summer. Want to make sure we get Teresa to come back for that. But
one of the council members asked the question of Teresa Bruns, the Recreation Department Director, that, well, is that building really used? Well, it turns out it's the most used city facility because we have the afternoon programs and the other kinds of programs there. I mean, and it's used all day long, and it's used in a lot of evenings too. So all of our buildings are used a lot. If you come down here at night to the City Hall parking lot, you see a lot of cars parked here, and there's no place else for them to be doing anything other than in one of the city facilities. And it's true in the buildings in the parks. They're very much used.
Speaking of use, real quick, because we got to go, the Festival of Arts show is this weekend. So this weekend meaning that it's this Friday and Saturday and Sunday. So the art is already being set up. So I want to make sure people know about that. Yeah,
the tent's out there.
Yep.
Okay. Well, thank you for watching. We hope you'll watch the next time we're on. I don't know if we're back in 2 weeks.
Yes.
2 weeks, I think we are, aren't we?
I think that's right.
So, and if you have any ideas in the meantime of things you'd like for us to talk about, you can send an email to Blaine, or you can call and leave a message or talk to Blaine. Blaine is a surprising city manager. He really does enjoy talking to the citizens of the community. So give him a call.